Recently, the Trump administration has shocked the entire train system with a crazy action on one of Amtrak's most profitable regions. This once again tells us that the United States will still decide to be laughed at by other countries when it comes to the public transit system. So what happened? We will discuss everything about this in today's episode of Great Trainspeed. When we talk about passenger rail in the United States, leaving out the Northeast Corridor, NEC, would be a serious oversight. It's not just any train route. It's Amtrak's busiest and most vital artery, stretching from Washington, D.C. to Boston and supporting over 2,200 trains per day. Every year, millions of Americans depend on the Northeast Corridor for travel. This trend continued strongly in fiscal year 2024, with a steady increase in ridership. Amtrak, for instance, saw a 15.9% year-over-year rise in weekday ridership on the corridor, surpassing pre-pandemic weekday numbers by 4.2%, with an average of 44,000 weekday riders. The increase in weekend passengers was even more significant, exceeding fiscal year 2019 weekend ridership by 26.7%. In 2024, Amtrak's average daily weekend ridership matched its average weekday ridership. When comparing the Northeast Corridor to other Amtrak routes, the scale of its ridership becomes even more apparent. In fiscal year 2024, the NEC handled approximately 15.9 million passengers, a number that dwarfs other corridors across the country. The acela alone accounted for more than 3.5 million of those riders, following a strong 9% year-over-year increase. Meanwhile, the Empire Service, which connects New York City to Niagara Falls, carried just over 2 million passengers. The Pacific Surfliner, a popular route along California's coast, reached similar levels, slightly exceeding 2 million. Other corridors like Amtrak Virginia and Amtrak Cascades posted record numbers, 1.4 million and just under 1 million riders respectively. The contrast highlights a clear reality. No other corridor comes close to matching the Northeast Corridor's scale, speed, or strategic importance in the national rail network. Each of these routes plays an important role in its own region, but none come close to matching the scale and density of the NEC. Simply put, the Northeast Corridor accounts for the lion's share of Amtrak ridership. It supports the national brand, generates the highest revenue, and operates in some of the most complex and congested transportation markets in the country. The numbers make it clear, the NEC isn't just another train line. It's the core of Amtrak's network, and without it, the whole system would struggle both financially and operationally. So what's going on with the NEC? On June 2nd, 2025, Trump administration has proposed a budget call for a 25% cut in Amtrak's Northeast Corridor funding. Specifically, the administration is suggesting Congress allocate only $850 million to the NEC for fiscal year 2026, down from $1.14 billion the year before. This proposed reduction comes at a time when the overall budget for the Federal Railroad Administration, FRA, has actually increased, rising from $16.1 billion in 2025 to $16.4 billion in 2026. But the portion going to Amtrak remains constrained, only $1.6 billion for its entire year national network. While that's up from $1.3 billion the previous year, it's still far from adequate when you consider the size and scope of Amtrak's responsibilities. In 2024, Amtrak generated $2.5 billion in ticket revenue, showing it's not just a public service, it's a major economic engine. But unlike highways and airports, which routinely receive large-scale federal funding, the NEC still struggles for consistent investment. For a country investing billions into roads and aviation, this shift in priorities feels like a missed opportunity. If the U.S. is serious about modern transportation, the NEC deserves more than minimal support. It's not just about saving a train line. It's about making a long-term investment in mobility, economic growth, and environmental sustainability. And the data already proves the impact is real. What's missing is the political will. Do you think cutting down the funding for the NEC is a big mistake? Drop a 1 if you agree, and 0 if you don't. So why does the NEC need a major investment? Even with all the benefits the Northeast Corridor brings to the region, fast connections, economic productivity, and daily convenience, it's also facing some serious challenges. And most of them come down to one thing: money. At first glance, Amtrak's acela service seems like a modern success story. It's the fastest option for rail travel in the United States, and it's growing in popularity. But dig a little deeper, and the picture becomes more complicated. Despite its reputation, acela averages only about 70 miles per hour, well below what we'd expect from high-speed rail systems in Europe or Asia. The main reason? Aging infrastructure and shared track usage with freight trains. Right now, nearly 40% of Amtrak's Northeast Corridor trains experience delays. These are caused by everything from track congestion to outdated signal systems to mechanical issues. Some of the most critical parts of the corridor, the Baltimore and Hudson River tunnels, are more than 100 years old and badly deteriorated. They frequently cause delays for acela, frustrating travelers who expect faster, more reliable service. In fact, travel times on the NEC haven't significantly improved in decades, even as demand keeps rising. Keeping the corridor operational isn't cheap. According to the Northeast Corridor Infrastructure and Operations Advisory Commission, maintaining today's service levels over the next 20 years will require at least $52 billion in capital investment. And if the NEC were ever forced to shut down, the economic loss would be staggering, estimated at $100 million per day. Fortunately, the situation isn't being ignored. The federal government and Amtrak have started advancing key infrastructure projects. Some of the most notable include Portal North Bridge replacement in New Jersey-Connecticut River. Each of these projects targets a specific weakness in the corridor, aiming to improve reliability, speed, and capacity. But there's one shared obstacle that keeps coming up: funding. Without sustained and adequate investment, these projects risk delay or even cancellation. And that's a problem for everyone, from policymakers to daily commuters. If you've experienced these problems firsthand as a passenger, let us know in the comments. Now, with this US funding rail in mind, let's have a bigger picture point of view, especially about high-speed train. Let's be honest. When you compare the US train system to places like Japan, France, or especially China, the gap is pretty obvious. Both the US and China have large national rail networks, but how they build and run their trains couldn't be more different, especially when it comes to speed, scale, and investment. In China, high-speed rail is a huge part of the country's growth strategy. Over the last 20 years, they've built the largest high-speed rail network on the planet, more than 40,000 kilometers of dedicated track. Their trains, like the Fuxinghao, hit speeds of 350 kilometers per hour and can get you from Beijing to Shanghai in under 5 hours. And unlike in the US, these tracks are built just for passenger trains. No sharing with freight, no squeezing through outdated tunnels. In 2024, China's high-speed rail network handled more than 4.3 billion passenger trips. The trains are fast, affordable, and connect directly to big cities and industrial zones. Places like Wuhan, Zhengzhou, and Guangzhou are now major rail hubs, helping people move faster and boosting the local economy along the way. And when it comes to money, China isn't holding back. In 2024, they invested around $118 billion into rail, most of it going into high-speed lines. Just that year alone, they added over 3,000 kilometers of new track, nearly 80% of it high-speed. Projects like these are fully planned by the government and tied right into their economic goals. Some routes even turn a profit, but others are funded just to help certain regions grow. Either way, it's clear, China sees rail as a long-term investment, not just another way to get from point A to B. Now compare that with the US intercity rail, which is mostly handled by Amtrak. Take the acela, for example. It's billed as America's high-speed option, but even though it can hit 150 miles per hour, it averages closer to 70 miles per hour. Why? Old infrastructure, sharp curves, and the fact that it still has to share tracks with freight trains. Some of the tunnels and bridges it uses are over 100 years old, and breakdowns and delays are pretty common. The funding situation isn't great either. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act promise $66 billion for rail, with $24 billion set aside for the NEC. But most of that is being spent on catching up with repairs, not on building new lines. And with political priorities shifting all the time, long-term planning is tough. Meanwhile, roads and air travel keep getting the bulk of the budget. While both countries have trains, the difference in commitment is hard to miss. China is clearly building for the future, putting serious investment into high-speed rail with long-term planning, while the US is mostly focused on keeping an aging system running. That said, there's something to take away from both approaches. China shows what's possible when you treat rail as a national priority, and the US proves that strong demand exists, especially in busy corridors like the Northeast Corridor. The real question now is whether the US can move beyond patchwork repairs and finally commit to building a modern rail system that meets passengers' needs. That's it for today's video. Thanks for hanging out with us. Hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. See you next time.